In the fall of 2016, a retired FBI agent named Dave Benskoda climbed a barbed wire fence in eastern Washington and walked into an orchard that hadn't been pruned in over 100 years. Trees gnarled into themselves, bark splitting, branches dragging the dirt. But hanging from one twisted limb, fruit. He pulled an apple off the branch, turned it in his hand, and matched it against a watercolor painting from 1889. Nobody alive had eaten this variety in a century. He wasn't solving a crime. He was trying to find what was left. Because at their peak, 17,000 named apple varieties grew across North America. Today, 15 of them account for 90% of the grocery store. That collapse wasn't weather, wasn't disease, wasn't bad luck. It was a business decision, made by one nursery, scaled by one industry, and bailed out by the federal government when the whole thing fell apart. We dug through USDA planting records, nursery ledgers, agricultural census data, and industry reports going back 3 centuries. Sources are in the description. Here's what the record shows. Every domesticated apple on Earth traces back to one wild species, Malus sieversii, still growing in the Tian Shan Mountains of Kazakhstan. Wild apple trees tangled together, no two producing the same fruit. Cherries to softballs, sweet, sour, bitter, tannic, every combination in a single grove. Seeds traveled the Silk Road in the guts of horses and bears, crossing with European crabapples along the way, picking up tartness and disease resistance at every stop. By the time apples reached America, the species carried thousands of years of accumulated genetic diversity. That diversity was the insurance policy, and that's exactly what the industry threw away. In colonial America, nobody ate apples, they drank them. Water was unreliable. European grapes died in American soil. But apple trees planted from seed thrived almost everywhere. Hard cider became the default drink. One estimate puts consumption at over 10 ounces per person per day. And because every apple seed produces a genetically unique tree, diversity exploded. Every farmstead orchard was a one-of-a-kind genetic experiment. Families named the best ones: Esopus Spitzenberg for the table, Roxbury russet for storage, Tallman Sweet for drying. Some wouldn't taste good until spring, after months in a root cellar, the only fresh fruit a family had until next harvest. By 1905, commercial orchards grew roughly 14,000 named varieties. The USDA hired 65 artists to paint them. 7,584 watercolors, 3,807 of apples alone. Each painting recorded the grower, the county, the state. It was a census of living genetic material. Then 3 forces dismantled it. The first was temperance. The popular story: Prohibition agents stormed the countryside chopping down cider orchards. The record is messier. Historians have found almost no documented cases of mass destruction by enforcers. What actually happened was subtler. Starting in the 1840s, decades before Prohibition, the temperance movement pressured farming communities to view cider as sinful. Farmers voluntarily replanted cider orchards with dessert apples or let cider trees die. Meanwhile, German and Irish immigrants brought beer traditions. Urbanization concentrated people in cities where cider production was impractical. Beer could be brewed at industrial scale from grain shipped by rail. By the time Prohibition arrived in 1920, cider was already fading. The 18th Amendment finished what 50 years of cultural pressure had started. When Prohibition ended in 1933, nobody replanted cider varieties. Hundreds of bitter, tannic varieties, perfected for fermentation over centuries, vanished from the landscape. The second force was the nursery industry. It has a name: Stark Brothers. In 1872, an Iowa farmer named Jesse Hyatt noticed a rogue seedling in his orchard. He cut it down. It grew back. He cut it again. It grew back. The third time, he let it fruit. Striped red and gold, roundish, 5 bumps on the bottom, he called it the Hawkeye. In 1893, Hyatt entered it in Stark Brothers' fruit contest. Clarence Stark bid in and reportedly said, "My, that's delicious." They bought exclusive rights, renamed it, and spent the equivalent of $10 million marketing it. By World War II, the Red Delicious was America's most popular apple. By the 1980s, it was 75% of Washington state's crop. Washington produces 2/3 of America's apples. One variety, one state, one industry, Then the industry destroyed the apple it had built. Red Delicious trees produce frequent mutations, branches that fruit slightly differently. Growers propagated whichever mutations were reddest, most elongated, most photogenic, not best tasting, prettiest. Over decades, the original Hawkeye, genuinely crisp, juicy, aromatic, was bred into thick, bitter skin, mealy flesh, and almost no flavor. One historian called it the largest compost maker in the country. The philosophy: produce the most uniform, most bruise-resistant, longest shelf life apple possible. Flavor was not a variable anyone optimized for. And because the industry consolidated around this one variety, thousands of regional apples were ripped out to make room. The collapse arrived in the 1990s. Consumers stopped buying Red Delicious. Gala, Fuji, Honeycrisp, varieties from international programs that actually tasted good, were taking shelf space. Washington growers, locked into Red Delicious orchards that cost $50,000 per acre to replant, couldn't pivot. In 2000, the government approved the largest bailout in apple industry history, $138 million. The industry that spent a century consolidating around one cosmetically perfect apple needed a taxpayer rescue when consumers figured out it didn't taste like anything. By 2018, Gala overtook Red Delicious in US sales. Red Delicious production dropped 40%. Half the remaining crop ships overseas, Mexico, India, Southeast Asia, or ends up in schools, prisons, and food banks. The apple bred to look irresistible is now the apple of last resort, served where people don't get to choose. Meanwhile, 3,807 watercolor paintings of apples sit in a government archive in Maryland, painted between 1886 and 1942 by USDA artists, many of them women, in an era when government illustration was one of the few art careers open to them. The principal artist, Deborah Griscom Passmore, spent nearly 20 years painting over 1,500 watercolors. Each one captures the exact color, flesh density, seed arrangement that distinguished one variety from another, a visual genome of American apples. After the program ended, the paintings sat in storage for decades. The USDA digitized them in 2009, put them behind a paywall that made less than $600 in 4 years. In 2015, an activist filed a FOIA request and got them released. The Archive of Apple Diversity, painted, catalogued, filed by the government, had been locked in a drawer the entire time it was being destroyed. Today, a scattered network of people are trying to recover what's left. Ben Scotter, the FBI agent from our opening, co-founded the Lost Apple Project. He and his partner, E.J. Brandt, search abandoned homestead orchards across the Pacific Northwest, matching fruit to county fair records and USDA watercolors. They've rediscovered 29 varieties thought to be extinct. In Maine, John Bunker has spent 40 years tracking heritage apples. His super chili farm holds over 200 rare varieties. His Maine heritage orchard preserves around 300. In North Carolina, Tom Brown spent decades recovering southern Appalachian varieties from antebellum catalogs, over 1,200 total. He found the Junaluska, a variety Cherokee growers standardized 2 centuries ago, on a single surviving tree in a mountain forest. These people use the same tools the USDA had all along: nursery records, county fair logs, watercolor archives, oral histories. So here's what the full record tells us. For thousands of years, the apple built its survival on diversity. Every seed a new combination. Every orchard a genetic experiment. Disease hit one variety, a dozen others stood untouched. Then the commercial system found it, asked one question: which apple sells the most units right now? And eliminated everything that didn't fit the answer. A nursery promoted one variety. An industry bred it for looks until it lost its flavor. A state built its economy on a single clone. When the market shifted, the whole system needed a bailout because it had destroyed the diversity that would have let it adapt. 17,000 varieties. 3 centuries of accumulated resilience, gone in 1 century of consolidation. The USDA Watercolor Archive, 3,807 paintings of what America grew, was sitting in a government building the whole time. Painted, catalogued, filed. Nobody opened it, because monoculture was cheaper. The apple isn't the only crop America stripped down to a handful of commercial varieties. The archives are full of files like this: seeds lost, breeds erased, diversity buried. We're pulling the next one now. Subscribe to Farmers Archives so you're here when we open it. Thanks for watching.